High, Texas lies in the western part of Blanco County along U.S. Route 290. Although High is unincorporated, it does have a post office and a zip code, named from Hiram High G. Brown, who settled the area with his parents in 1872. He constructed a small store and a house near the Pedernales River. Brown was appointed postmaster upon getting a post office established in his store on April 17, 1886. In 1965, on the porch of the High Post Office, Lyndon B. Johnson swore in Lawrence F. O'Brien as United States Postmaster General. In 1966, the High General Store and Post Office was designated a recorded Texas historic landmark, marker number 2607. Today we're at Garrison Brothers Distillery in High, Texas. Speaking with Mr. Dan Garrison here. They bought this land, 68-acre compound in 2003 and became legal in 2006. Dan, thank you so much for having us out, man.
My pleasure.
You bet, man. Go ahead and tell them, the whole story about Garrison Brothers Distillery.
Sure. I lost my job when I was 40 years old and kind of had to remake myself, and I decided to do something I loved, and there's nothing I love more than bourbon whiskey. I've been drinking bourbon since I was about 13 years old, and love the stuff, and I decided, you know what, I bet you if somebody can make good bourbon from Texas that's better than the stuff that's coming out of Kentucky, I'm gonna have something pretty special. So I bought my first still in 2004, managed to experiment for 3 or 4 years while I was still under the radar. If anybody from the TABC is watching, the statute of limitations has run out on that. Got my federal permit in 2007, started making bourbon again, and sold my first bottles in 2010. And today, 15 years later, we are selling bourbon in 23 states across America and 6 foreign countries. And I think we're making the finest tasting, highest quality bourbon whiskey in the world. And I love what I do. I've got the greatest job on earth. I drink good bourbon with new friends every single day, so can't complain a bit about what I do.
Tell them about the compound here. You said it was 68 acres and how it's laid out.
Yeah, so we're down in what we call the hospitality area. We got a bunch of chairs, we got a couple of fire pits. You can roast s'mores over there in the wintertime. We got iced tea and lemonade in the summertime. And people just hang out here. We do tours Wednesday through Sunday at 10 o'clock, noon, 2 o'clock, and 4 o'clock. And everybody just kind of brings out a picnic lunch on Saturday and Sunday and hangs out in this beautiful area, enjoying the views. And then we'll take them up the hill, give them about an hour-and-a-half tour of the distillery. About a half mile up the road is our still house, our cookhouse, where we make all the beer. The beer then ferments for 4 or 5 days and becomes higher proof beer, becomes about 15% alcohol by volume. Then we pump that beer over to the next building, which is called our still house, and that's where we have 4 stills. We have the Copper Cowgirl, which was my original still that I bought in 2004. We brought in reinforcements in 2010. One still is called Fat Man and one still is called Little Boy. Those are 500-gallon Vendome brass and copperwork stills. And last year, in 2017, we decided that we still weren't making enough bourbon, so we brought in the big daddy of them all. It's a 2,000-gallon Vendome brass and copperworks pot still. We call that one the Big Johnson, and he's been operating for about 3 months, and we're getting some really nice white dog off of that one that's going into these barrels.
That's awesome. Speaking of the barrels, I noticed you have a bunch of barrels here. I know that you season and you left your whiskey. I guess that's probably a misnomer, but how often do you use those barrels?
So if you're making bourbon whiskey, bourbon has to hold, it's held to a higher standard than other types of whiskeys. Whiskey is a broad umbrella category that describes any distilled spirit made from grain that is aged in a wood barrel. Bourbon has to use a new barrel every single time. Bourbon has to be made in America. Bourbon has to be at least 51% corn in your mash bill, which is the beer that you make, and then you extract the alcohol from that beer and it ages in a white American oak barrel. Our barrels are 15-gallon, 24-gallon, 27-gallon, 30-gallon, and 53-gallon barrels. We have about 12,000 on the property today that are filled with good bourbon whiskey, and those are going to age anywhere from 2 years to 7 years. When we decide that the bourbon inside is ready, we actually taste every barrel when it gets 4 years old, when it reaches its 4-year-old birthday, to decide which barrels we're going to marry together to create a small batch, or if one barrel is particularly interesting and unusual, we'll bottle that as single barrel bourbon. All the bottles that come out of this barrel, about 60 bottles, will all be from this one individual barrel. And then we also do Garrison Brothers Cowboy Bourbon, which is the best we've got. It's the very best barrels from our barn. We also do a bourbon called Balmorhea, which is now named after the state park in West Texas. And if you buy a bottle of Balmorhea, we're giving $5 to Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation to help preserve and landscape Balmorhea far into the future. So
awesome.
That's Garrison Brothers. Good bourbon can change the world, and we're going to show people one bottle at a time.
Well, that's great. You know, I was talking to some of your employees here, and I'm a little concerned about your business plan. And I'm sure that it's a deal to help these people because you're a graduate from the University of Texas. Hook 'em, right?
Hook 'em.
And you've got a bunch of Aggies and Red Raiders working for you. I mean, I don't understand that. Are you just trying to educate them because
they got a long ways to go, but you know, we consider it social work. We're trying to educate them at the same time that they're doing their jobs, and they work hard. They do. All those Aggies and those Red Raiders, they work really hard, despite their intellectual dysfunction.
Well, I tell you, man, that's a great one thing about Texans. You know, we like helping each other, and I really I appreciate y'all doing that. You know, everybody needs the help.
Well, we've got good folks out here.
That's
Come
good.
visit us.
Yeah, folks, I'm telling you what, if you get a chance, you're down in the hill country, stop by High Texas at the Garrison Brothers Distillery, visit with Dan here, and remember now, good bourbon can change the world, and that's coming from a couple of Texans. Adios.
Bye-bye.